What's good, y'all? Hope everybody's well. Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. I want to get one in real quick. It's been a crazy last couple days, but basically my son is home from school, so he and I have just been kicking it up at all hours of the night, chilling, talking, and I'm always happy to see him when he comes back through. So, winter break and summer is always a great time for me now. I get to kick it with him. So this will be short because I'm trying to get back in there with him. He asked me if he could help cook this year because I cook Thanksgiving every year, and so he's gonna help me cook. So we in there doing it, and the way I like to do it, we do our gumbo at Thanksgiving. I don't wait till New Year's. That is what it is. It's a family tradition based on my wife, and so I want to keep it alive. You know what I mean? We were a young couple. I always wanted to have some gumbo, but my family only made it like once a decade. And she said she knew how to cook it. So she cooked it for Thanksgiving, and ever since we kept doing it even after she passed. So my son is going to help me with that. So we're having a ball, that said. But also got some repair people coming soon. So we just going to jump into this real quick because I had a few thoughts I wanted to share and get some things out real quick. That said, like, share, subscribe, join. Y'all know the deal. Support the channel so we can continue to bring you independent Black male thought. So you know what it is. You got the Patreon, Cash App, PayPal, Venmo. You can do the super chat. All of that is well and good and appreciated. Also, you can become a patron of the channel if you go to Patreon. The number is right there under my face, right there on the screen, and you can become a supporter of not only the Onyx Report on YouTube, but also of the Institute for Black Male Studies. So support, if you will. Couple other housekeeping things. Pick up the book Solutions for Anti-Black Misandry if you haven't already. Check it out. Go ahead and support. You can get that on Amazon, pretty much any website where you get your books. It should be there. So hopefully you will support the book, so we can continue with our work. And of course, if you are still interested in brandishing the 18-point Black male political agenda, you can actually wear it on your shirt. So you can pick that up on the Institute for Black Male Studies.com website. Go right into merchandise, and there are a number of different apparel options where you can wear the agenda. So if you want to support along those lines, we actually appreciate it. So before we get into the main subject, there's a little side thing that I wanted to point out. This has been running around the internet. Just wanted to drop a word about it. So there's a video that I'm going to play, and then I'm going to show you the response that a couple brothers had that I greatly respect. So check this out.
Bro, excuse me. I've had a bad day. Can I have a hug?
Hell nah.
Oh, have a good day. Excuse me, ma'am. I've had a bad day. Can I have a hug? Oh, thank you. You too? Oh, thank you, thank you. You guys have a great day. Excuse me, y'all. I've had a bad day. Can I have a group hug? Oh, thank you guys.
Have
thank
a
you.
blessed day.
You guys have a great day.
Thank
you too. Have a
you.
blessed day. Excuse me, bro. I've had a bad day. Can I have a hug? Have a good day. Excuse me, ma'am. I've had a bad day. Can I have a hug?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So much. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. I've had a bad day. Can I have a hug? Thank you, man. Thank you. You have a great day. Excuse me, bro. I've had a bad day. Can I have a hug? Oh, come on, bro. Love you too, bro. You have a great day. Excuse me, ma'am. I've had a bad day. Can I have a hug? Oh, thank you so much. You have a great day. Excuse me, sir. I've had a bad day. Can I have a hug? Come on, man. Man, thank you. You have a great day.
Yeah. So as you can see, this was put together and posted out there to shame Black men, to suggest that we are the problem. We lack empathy. We're not, supportive of the human experience of some sort, right? Where everybody under the sun wants to hug this young man except for Black men. So the problem must be ours. And of course, you had some divestors and some feminists share it. But I wanted to share with you a couple of responses that some brothers had that, that responded to this. I appreciate it. It saved me some time. So I wanted to just get this out there. So there's a couple people. Let me if I can enlarge this a bit. There we go. So shout out to Pedagogy in Black on YouTube. Rennie, Hope he's good. He played the video, you know what I mean? But his response was exactly what it should be. He said, "In what world should black men trust a random white male with a camera behind them? There's people talking about black women for the win. Y'all are delusional. The white male demographic just voted 60% for Trump, but let's make this about black masculinity." Right? The other response came from my boy Torin, who's been a guest of the show a couple of different times. And he was responding to somebody named Mama T. So Mama T is talking about this video and says the same group of people always talking about consent and boundaries are now in an uproar over black men not allowing strangers to touch them, which I thought was a brilliant response to this. Absolutely. And then Torin responds with this. He says, "Understanding two truths will help make this clear for you. First, people are hypocrites and full of shit. Second, every human has the right to refuse contact except black men and our boys. Our literal bodies were once property and people still get offended if we deny access." So just wanted to drop that real quick because I think there's some important dynamics there as far as our bodies and, you know, how we choose to respond to it. Being touched, especially on camera. You don't know what people are doing on social media. You don't know what kind of jokes they're playing. And, you know, I don't have a problem with it. But at the end of the day, if we talk about bodily autonomy, then people should have the right to do what they want to do, including not participate without having to be maligned. So shout out to, you know, some of the people I pointed out there. I just wanted to kind of put that on the table for the record, because these things come and go, and sometimes they need to be commented on. So shout out to the brothers on Twitter in terms of that. Rennie, Torin, and Mama T. Appreciate that. Anyway, so let's jump into it. Brother on Instagram sent me something that I wanted to share. Let me see where I put it. I had it up for a second and then I moved it around. I think it's here. There we go. All right. So a brother sent me this. And I'm going to read you, what he sent, read my responses, because we got innerlightradio.com as well as every other social media venue that we've used to broadcast the show. So my radio listeners, I'm going to read it for them most particularly. So there were a couple of different slides that he shared, but it only captured the main slide, and that's okay. The main slide basically says, "I know many of us may have a lot of feelings as we process this week's election results. I want to validate whatever feelings you may have and also reassure you that Hype's mission is as crucial as ever, empowering girls of color with the tech skills and community they need to thrive in an industry where they will still be vastly underrepresented. We are here to change that, and our girls need to be assured that we are still here for them," so on and so forth. So with that said, the brother who sent it to me said something, and I'm not posting his name here because he, I don't assume that unless you let me know you're good with that. He says, "This is a nonprofit run by a black woman to teach black girls STEM." He says she posted after Trump won the election that she lost a $70,000 grant that was previously approved. Black women about to lose their proximity to whiteness while black men and boys were never invited. Okay? So when I posted it, and I shared this, my response on Instagram as well, I said, "Remember last year when conservatives started suing black women-focused non- and for-profit groups whose sole purpose was to only help black women and girls? Those successful lawsuits and Trump's victory sealed the end of such funding practices. This is likely part of the fallout." And then I said, let me see. There we go. I said, "Black men aren't celebrating this necessarily. Now, that doesn't mean every single brother isn't, because some are, but in wide scale fashion, we're not. You're not seeing videos of brothers celebrating and singing and laughing about these things ending the way you saw black women respond, not only to the loss of Harris, but to the attack on black men as the sole cause of her loss. Like we've seen video after video of this where we were blamed and so on and so forth. You're not seeing black men celebrating this in any large numbers. But I said, we're not crying in the streets either, as it highlights a painful reality we largely ignore in public, that many such black women purposely sold out and didn't give a damn about the boys and men who didn't get any help at all. And this was after they vehemently protested Obama's My Brother's Keeper program some years ago, right? I remember when that protest happened. And I even had a guy on Twitter try to tell me that, I was delusional and this wasn't real, and white people led, to the end of My Brother's Keeper. And I'm like, man, I remember it. it was led by Black feminists, mostly Black feminist women. And I've said this before, in as much as there was already a White House Council for Women and Girls, the national petition they put together could have been used to expand that and have it focused directly on Black girls in some kind of way. But instead of that, they used it to attack My Brother's Keeper program, which wasn't even directly earmarked for Black males. It was earmarked for males of color. It didn't involve federal funding. It was donation based, but I still thought I didn't think it went far enough. But just the possibility that Black males may be able to get something out of it led to a wholesale response. But since that time, especially from the pandemic on, and the Onyx Report has been covering this scores of times since 2020, most particularly, but even before, we pointed out all the programs, the nonprofits, the grants, sometimes whole sheets and lists of them that I've gone over on this show that primarily focused on Black women and girls. And the thing we didn't see happen? We didn't see one Black woman stand up and say this, that if the Black community is getting all of this for women and girls, maybe there should be something for brothers. I didn't see one. Here's the thing. You can share with me and show me that I'm wrong, and I'll be happy to be wrong. But I'm just telling you, I hadn't seen one. But all these resources that went to Black women and girls, they celebrated it. They rubbed it in Black men's faces. They told us we weren't shit because we didn't get what they were getting, all the while not inviting us to even share in any of it. It got so bad that certain brothers had to use Black women as the face of their PPP or the loan applications just to get help for their business. That's how bad it got. And still, Black women didn't say anything. But now that you have conservative white men, like Ed Blum, I believe his name is, who started suing some of these organizations, started suing and winning, like with the Fearless Fund, now you started to see a rollback. This happened before Trump's election, but I'm sure Trump's election really kind of slam dunked it. Either way, Black men haven't said anything about it. I haven't seen Black men say anything about it. I decided to say something because I wanted to put this in context. But Black men didn't celebrate. We didn't celebrate when we weren't included. We ain't celebrated that it's failed. There were individuals that will always be all over the spectrum in terms of responses, but for the most part, we ignored it. And I think this is becoming a problem. It's becoming a problem that we continue to ignore the disrespect, the disregard that we get from within our own community just to keep the peace. I've had a couple of brothers reach out to me. It's about 3 or 4 Black nationalists reach out to me in the last few weeks. And I always considered myself a nationalist growing up. So these conversations for me are weird, but they're basically brothers that are telling me I'm going too hard in the paint and that I need to basically, just be quiet. Support the sisters, be quiet, let them have their day and leave it at that. Well, that's been the game plan for generations and it's not working. And if it calls for Black men to silence themselves and keep being treated as less than, it's not going to work anymore, whether I say anything about it or not. Black men are not having it. Black men are voting with their feet. And I keep telling people this. You got to understand something. Social media, manosphere in particular, is not the cause of Black men's actions, especially as it speaks to and relates to Black men withdrawing from family participation, societal participation, whatever it may be. You see the numbers of men, and this is happening across race, starting to withdraw from participation, even including the rising suicide rates. A lot of that is a product of Black men making responses to what's happening to them while nobody wants to actually talk about what's happening to them. But the manosphere is not the cause of those things. The manosphere is a small percentage of brothers who are the only ones willing to explain it. And they're not going to be politically correct about it. They're not going to be sweet and nice. It's not going to be using the King's English. It's not an academic project. It's actually everyday brothers on every scale of the class metric all the way across geography and so on and so forth. These brothers are explaining it from their own context. Now, whether you can stomach it or not is your problem. If you actually want to know what's going on with Black men, these groups are actually explaining it to you, but it was happening anyway. And it's been going on for decades. But there are some responses in particular that I want to get to, one in particular. So when I talk about these kind of projects that solely focused on Black women and girls that happily sopped those resources up and didn't share, didn't acknowledge, didn't even say anything about the needs of the men in their own community, men have been crafting a response. And it's a response that I didn't see coming. So let me share with you what I wrote on a recent blog. I shared it in my community tab right here on YouTube. I also shared it on my Facebook page, but if you're interested in it, you can go to newblackmasculinities.wordpress.com and you can read it yourself. It's very short. And actually, it's actually comprised of 2 Facebook posts I made. So it's not long at all. And the cover image is one of Dave Chappelle with his wife. Right? And the title of it is Why Black Men Just Want White Women is used to obscure Black men's lived truths. Right? So I'll read it again. Why Black men just want white women is used to obscure Black men's lived truths. Right? So this is one of the things that I've been hearing since I was a kid. This accusation that Black men just want to be with white women, and that's the only reason they have any interest in interracial relationships, intercultural relationships. You know, it's made to be about white women, and that's it. Which I think is really a deflection from actually having to deal with the complexity of Black men and what they're dealing with and what they're doing, right? So the first post was on my Facebook page November 13th of this year, and it says, we often hear that Black men who date interracially or internationally only do so because of white supremacy, except if their partner is of African descent, albeit from another country. I don't argue that this is never the case, but I do believe there's another factor many purposefully ignore. If contempt has become too much of a normalized part of our Black love language, as many Black men purport, then it's understandable why many Black men split themselves. And here we're going to talk about what I call the split method. It's been going on for quite a while, but we've not really talked about it the way I think we're going to approach it here. I said, they may advocate politically based on their training, but socially and intimately, they identify with whomever is kind, affectionate, and loving enough to suit their needs. Right? And if you doubt the degree to which contempt is a part of Black men and women's relations, have you paid attention to the contempt for Black men in social media in the last week after Trump's election? Hell, you could see the contempt before Trump's election toward Black men from Black women in regard to the election, the upcoming election, even though Black men are documented as being the most progressive, voting for women candidates at to the highest degree, more than any other group of men, and yet we're still shit on, right? Then I said, unless the Black community can find a miraculous way to actually hear Black men's concerns, we've heard Black women's for decades in books, TVs, classrooms, albums, films, and in person, and embrace the men outside a stereotype, I predict this split approach will become the norm for many pro-Black male activists, whether they're progressive, conservative politicians, public activists, or hardcore nationalists, Black nationalists. Now, what I mean real quick when I say that we've already heard from Black women, I just want to reiterate. Right? Sometimes I'm hearing these conversations and it's in response to red pill spaces, and they're saying, well, we just need to hear everybody out. We need to, and I'm like, it's not equal. You've listened to a couple of YouTube clips that you didn't like and you want to even the playing field and say, well, let's give everybody a voice. What you're avoiding is that we had to sit here and listen to generations of bullshit about Black men. We had to watch movies. Our mothers in the 80s dragged us to watch Steven Spielberg directed movies about Black men being nothing but fucking monsters. And you guys are mad about YouTube clips that you could turn off wherever you want. Some of the books that inspired those movies were required reading for people like myself who wanted to get a doctorate, not necessarily in anything gender focused, but I nonetheless had to read some of the most vile, misandrous material I'd ever seen in my life. It was like being force-fed in graduate school and even in undergrad. My son is getting it now in his classes. I can turn on almost any movie and be force-fed some brand of misandrous feminism, and yet we got to act like the playing field is equal because for the last 5 to 10 years, some brothers on YouTube have been making some noise that people don't like. The playing field has never been equal. You can talk about a couple of individual hip-hop artists, maybe some comedians that said some, Black masculinist things over the last few decades, but all in all, the playing field has never been equal. Anyway, so back to this, right? I said it's quiet because I'm talking here about the split approach that I'm going to explain in a second. It's quiet, non-combative, less stressful, and does not require, years of argumentation to reach a conclusion. In fact, I argue it's already been slowly growing since the 1980s. For non-activists, they won't do anything community-wise at all. By the way, the younger teen generation of Black men are already living this reality. What is the split approach? Well, the picture I put up at the top of Dave Chappelle and his wife is an example of this. I believe she's Filipino, right? You do have Van Jones with his ex-wife, Jana Carter. He's got a new relationship now. He's got another kid that he just had. This time, even though I think she's Caucasian, they're not married. They have some kind of just agreement that they're going to co-parent, right? These are some of the new family dynamics that are coming in. And then you got Cornel West with his wife, Anahita Madhavi West. And I butchered that pronunciation. I apologize. He is also a professor, right? She's actually been the only one of his wives. And I think he's been married like 4 times now that I've seen. Some of these brothers hide their wives. Let's be real. Cornell, bless him, just ran for president, had a black woman VP candidate on his arm. All the pictures you see, you'll see them together. You'll see him with other black women. I think many of these brothers in this split approach that I'm talking about, this split method that some brothers are using, brothers who are active, who want to improve the community, who are active in the community, what they'll do is politically, they'll still align themselves in many ways, visibly and actively with black women, but who do they come home to? Well, what we've been told most of our lives as black men is, the only time, if anybody that doesn't want to marry a black woman must be chasing after white women. And it is just, there are plenty of brothers who are with white women. That is what it is. But I think that's a way of dismissing the nuance of what's going on here. Because as you can see with Dave Chappelle, as you can see with Cornel West, and there's actually also, okay, I'll show you some of the other pictures I have later. But these brothers are not necessarily chasing white women. Sometimes they're Arab, sometimes they're Asian, sometimes they're Latina. There's all kinds of variations. And this is because for the most part, black men, black American men at that, are desired across the world. Right? This is not limited to just one group. So that said, there's something more complex going on, and having it be dismissed as this white supremacist, what would the term be? Fetish for white skin wholly misses the point of what black men are doing. Politically, you have brothers like this that do advocate for their community, and we may not all agree on their philosophy, from Van Jones to Cornel West to whomever else. We may not agree with how they approach helping the community, but I would argue that they have the best in mind to improve the community on one level or another. I do believe they believe it's the best. Whether you agree with them, whether I agree with them, is irrelevant. That's not what I'm talking about at this juncture. These brothers actually are trying to help. Who they go home to versus who they're publicly seen with is something I think we need to talk about. And I think we need to talk about it outside of the traditional way we've been doing so for the last few decades, really since the 1960s, which is just to malign them and dismiss them as chasing white women. We got to talk about the other side of the aisle, what's been going on in black relationships and what black women are imposing on black men that black men are starting to withdraw and having to deal with. Let me read to you the second post. This one I posted on November 23rd of this month, just a few days ago. I said, I used to believe what black women said about black men who get with other races of women. And as a young black nationalist, I also used to believe what I was told, that it was always about white supremacy. Then I gained some age and experience and actually talked to some of these men and found out more about them, right? I also found out that many of my professors in Africana or Black studies and in the Black conscious nationalist movement married African, Caribbean, and South American women increasingly since the 80s for the same reasons as brothers who married white women. See, there was a huge distinction between the two when I was growing up and when I was coming into higher education. A lot of my mentors were married to all kinds of different women from all kinds of different countries. Those who were married to white women were treated as Uncle Toms, even if the quality of their work was about uplifting the black community. Those that married African women, Caribbean women, even Afro-South American women were kind of tolerated, but people kind of ignored them. Really, I think in many ways, we didn't know what to do with them. But when I actually started to talk to these brothers, especially, and I say this a lot, when I would get a beer into them and let them just go off, what I often found is it wasn't about a fetish for white skin. It wasn't about a hatred for black skin. It was about peace. That's what these brothers talked about over 95% of the time. It was about peace. And most of them had multiple marriages prior to doing so, right? I remember years ago, Obsidian did a show with, oh man, I'm blanking on the brother's name. Just ran into him in the comments section. He emailed me. I didn't get a chance to get back with him, and I'll probably remember his name as soon as I finish this recording. But anyway, they once talked about, and this was like 6-7 years ago, they talked about the long, slow walk away from Black relationships. In other words, what they were saying is that many Black men are not jumping in the aisles and necessarily no longer dating Black women. You had a lot of brothers who it was a hard walk. It was a hard acceptance to realize that after how many brothers they date, the Black women they dated, there was the same results. Right? And this is not a biological DNA thing. This has to do with social training, right? It has to do with how women are socialized in terms of media, how they're socialized in families, especially from older women, from grandmother to mother to daughter to granddaughter. Same kind of programming about using resources in the West to exploit or extend vengeance to Black men for imagined slights, to the socialization idea rooted in white supremacist notions that Black men are inherently inferior. You have these kind of ideas that are invoked and imposed on Black men in such manner that the youth, I'm seeing a lot of young men that are just watching the behavior of young Black women have already checked out, right? And then I'm seeing grown Black men, sometimes, as I said, my mentors who checked out years ago but never said anything publicly. In their classrooms, they're feminists, Black feminists at that. But beyond that, they can tell you about horrible first, second, and sometimes third marriages. And now they're married to someone else. And it's not that they have no problems, but they have a manageable set of problems that come in a much lighter manner. But I'll continue this and then we'll finish talking about it. Right. Okay. Despite the popularity of the white supremacy thesis, right, the idea that anybody who's not married to a Black woman, as far as Black men are concerned, are just chasing white women, I have to say I tend to find more often than not, men sought out women who were peaceful, feminine, and cooperative, and far less contemptuous of them or argumentative. They did not want women constantly in competition with them. At this point in their lives, these cats were far more relaxed and in a more peaceful state than they were in previous relationships. This isn't to say that their new relationships didn't come with their own brand of drama, but that the drama it came with was more manageable than what they endured prior. Often, I would see the same patterns where they would marry Black women, sometimes multiple times, but would often end up with someone from a different culture that seemed to either appreciate masculinity as a whole, or the women themselves had a particular appreciation for their individual masculinity, right? The key factor, however, for these men was the limited drama factor. And I'm not saying this to make this point because I'm mad about some Black woman and what she did to me. No, I'm talking about what these brothers articulated to me themselves. There was less drama. There was more peace. We'll get into it. Now, I've never found an interview with August Wilson talking about his 3 marriages to Brenda Burton from 1969 to 72. That was a Black woman. That was a 3-year marriage. In 1981, he married Judy Oliver, a social worker. They divorced in 1990. That was a 9-year marriage. He married again in 1994 and was survived by his 3rd wife, costume designer Constanza Romero, an 11-year marriage, whom he met on the set of The Piano Lessons. One of my favorite film and play projects from August Wilson. The new Netflix version is out. I watched it. I need to do a response to it. But there's also the earlier one that he did that I still recommend people watch with Charles Dutton. Phenomenal. But anyway, but you can see the order and length of his marriages and the types of women he got with and come to your own conclusions about whether or not this pattern is simply about white women or something deeper that would force us to actually explore what these men experience in relationships, particularly with Black women. I'm not interested in arguing that Black men and women should not be together. I'll just frame that sentence while I'm reading it. I'm interested in exploring what Black men actually think and feel about their relationships beyond what's politically correct, beyond what people can take, beyond what's palatable, beyond what people think should be said publicly versus what people actually live. The unvarnished truth of Black men's experiences, it's hard for us to actually have a chance to say in public. From my life experience, alongside what I've heard from thousands of these men over the years, a mixture of immediate influences and bad culturally inherited practices have shaped Black relationships into something that is often draining and emasculating. I just wonder what the new rationale will be to justify us ignoring Black men's lived experiences yet again. Irony? I can turn my television on right now and find 5 movies about Black women's frustrations with Black men, but a relative few that explain Black men's difficulties with Black women in relationships. Now, this second post was a product of me looking into the life of August Wilson. The woman in red is his first wife. I read her name above a moment ago. There it is, Brenda Burton. His second wife is pictured here, Judy Oliver. He's married to her for 9 years. My son is cooking. Let me see what he's texting me about. He burned one of the pie shells. See what I do for y'all? I'm over here. I got to get back in there to help out. So this is the second marriage to Judy Oliver. I couldn't find much information on her other than that she was a social worker. So I don't know if she's Caucasian, if she was mixed, if she was something else. All I know is they were married for 9 years. His first wife he was married to for 3 years. This was his last marriage to a Latina, Constanza Romero. And she was with him for 11 years until he died. Right? So again, when I'm talking about the split method, what I'm talking about here is for men that are actively trying to improve the quality of the community in some fashion, right? You have people that are trying to do that politically, like Cornel West, or academically. And then you have people like August Wilson, who I think was trying to do that in terms of theater and film and some literary works, so on and so forth. These brothers are committed to uplifting the community, but after multiple marriages, except in the case of Dave Chappelle, right? But he can talk about multiple relationships, I'm sure. These brothers decided to go another way. They decided to actually find partners based on something other than blackness. And at the end of the day, it's dismissed as chasing white women. That's usually how it's dismissed. When they come back with African women who are darker than their previous wives, don't nobody have nothing to say. But what I found when I actually sat down and talked to these brothers, even the brothers, who are conscious, nationalists, all of that, and went to Africa and found African wives, they often did so with the same motivations as brothers who dated interracially, interculturally, no matter where they pulled their white women from. They were doing so because the difficulties here were so pronounced. So when I talked a little bit earlier about the funding issue, where Black women enjoyed those funds and Black men and boys got none of it, what I was talking about really was a kind of sliver of a greater problem. Talking about the sense in which politically Black women have been operating on their own political interests for years without having to do anything with us. But it's not just political, it's also social. The dynamics that we've been living have split Black men and women's interests. Politically, this is why we have the 18-point Black male political agenda, which shows you how divergent our political outlook is. As many times as I've heard people try to tell me Black men and women don't have any political differences, I've challenged people to sit down with a group of women and go through the Black male political agenda, and you tell me how that discussion goes. Right? We have very different political outlooks, and many Black men don't even know it, which is why they don't realize it until they read the agenda and find that more often than not, they find things in there that they agree with, while their girlfriend, wife, or whomever else they're talking to about these ideas is damn near ready to cuss them out. This is the same thing that happened with brothers that not only brothers who voted for Trump, but brothers who didn't vote for Kamala, whether they were third party like myself, whether they didn't vote out of protest, and had women threaten to divorce them, girlfriends threaten to leave them. These differences are growing more and more vast. But again, those are political. Social ones play out as well. We've seen these for years. We just don't think about it in those terms. When you think about the divorce rate, particularly in the Black community, 1 out of 2 marriages end in divorce. 70 to 80% of those divorces are initiated by women. And with education, those percentages go up. When you take these things into account, the social differences between us have been growing for decades. Black women's requirements to even date men. Now you have women on social media requiring marital level commitments in terms of paying rent, paying bills by the first and second week of dating. This is unrealistic. And it's something that if we had always had in play, many of us wouldn't even be here. If our grandmothers required that our grandfathers, make the equivalent of 6 figures and pay all their bills upon meeting, many of us wouldn't even be here right now. But this is where it's gotten to. And so for brothers who are active in the community, this split method is something I think we're going to see more and more, where brothers find non-American Black women to really compensate for the lack of peace and lovingness in relationships, intimate relationships, while they politically still work with Black women. If that's what's happening with brothers who are active in the community, what do you think is happening with brothers that aren't? Brothers, everyday cats that just go to work and whatnot. Now, statistically speaking, I think for the most part, the majority of marriages are still going to remain with those that we grow up with, those in our proximity. But I do think the percentage of men who are going to go elsewhere in some form or fashion, local or abroad, I think that's going to continue to grow because it has grown in the last decade because many Black men feel there's no other opportunity. I think that number is still going to grow. How fast and to what extent, I can't say. Usually with these issues, you can find some kind of hope in the future with the next generation. But I'm already looking at the next couple generations, and these young men are checked out. Their humanity, their masculinity has long been disrespected and dismissed, and that's been supported by the women in our community. They are already checking. The difference between them and I is I grew up as the son of a Panther. So I had a sense of race loyalty that makes these kind of decisions difficult for me. I mean, really, if I dated anybody that was not a Black American woman, and I mean anybody, there was a part of me in angst because the way I grew up was so focused on the Black community that it was difficult. She could be the darkest African woman you can find, but I would still have those issues that I was wrestling with inside on the basis of that training. This young generation of men are not growing up with those issues, those reservations, and that sense of racial loyalty. Yeah. They're going to schools that have been far more diverse than they were when I grew up, and my schools were pretty diverse. I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up with Latinos. Oh goodness! I mean, the whole gamut, man. Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese, white, you name it. I grew up with all of them. But at the end of the day, I think the kids are growing up in schools that are way more diverse than that. And this is the reality of what's happening. So I think one of the things we have to take into account is that there is a mobile, upper middle class of Black men that are going to be able to leave because they can. And I think you're going to have a middle class version of that, but you're also going to have those who are going to start dating locally in interracial and intercultural, in an interracial and intercultural manner, because that's what's available to them. And I think Black men have been sought after more so than any other group for more than just sex, but for marriage. I shouldn't say any other group, but more so than Black women. Black women are sought after by other groups of men, but mainly for sex. They're not marrying Black women. And there's a large percentage of Black women who have children that are not fathered by Black men because of this dynamic. But Black men are actually sought after for everything from sex to marriage. And that is a wholly different dynamic, which leaves Black men with opportunities that many Black women don't have. And they're starting to exploit those opportunities. And I don't mean exploit in a negative way. Simply take advantage of because they don't feel that there's an option. It doesn't come with a whole lot of drama and may cost them quite a bit in terms of child support, in terms of alimony, in terms of divorce, simply because. It's almost a mantra in the Black community that if you get married, you have to get divorced, especially when you listen to women talk to each other, because it's about passing fancies about ideas about happiness, not about duty, not about family. It's a whimsical sense of what makes one happy, which in my opinion makes divorce and breakups inevitable. Many men are tired of it. So that said, I think there's a split there. I think the Black community is going to change, and it's in the process of doing so, whether locally or whether abroad. I think it's going to become way more mixed and diverse because of these issues. So the Black community, as we've understood it for the last century, is going to change dramatically in the next 50 to 100 years. It's going to be a very different community. So there is a death of the traditional Black community, but it's not going away entirely, but it is going to change form because there's an influx of other groups that are going to come into the mix simply on the basis of how we're being socialized and how we've been played against one another. But even though, and this is what my book deals with, I can show you how we've been played against one another, particularly after the civil rights movement, still doesn't change the fact that the bargain that white feminists in particular extended to Black women, something that they're running for wholeheartedly, 100%. And they're willing to sacrifice boys and men to hold up for it. This election was a slap in the face to many Black women because it really showed them white women's true heart. And even though we've seen this over and over again, they still keep trading us out for this Faustian bargain with white women. And so they feel slapped in the face, they feel disrespected, but they've been chasing this for so long that they burnt bridge after bridge with us and don't even believe and don't even acknowledge that they've done so. When I talk about the funding issue I talked about earlier, it's just one example of it. The election with Kamala was a whole nother one. Black men's interest didn't come into play until the last couple of weeks. And that plan extended by Kamala to try and get black male voters had nothing to do with anything black men had actually even asked for. It was just a list of shit that the Democrats were already doing. And black women, in many instances, resented the fact that she had to put that out and blamed us further for the impending loss. But at no point did she actually address black men's actual requests and needs. So these are the kind of things that are happening. I've been asked, is there any opportunity for repair? Right? And it's interesting that these questions don't come about till now. You know, we've been talking about this stuff for years and many didn't give a damn, especially black women. But is there any opportunity for repair? Well, I put it to you this way. There's a collective of women that I think are they're able to be cooperated with. They're willing to listen. They can articulate the relationships between black men and women beyond what they were told by Oprah, beyond what they were told by Twitter, and they can actually articulate the issues and concerns that many black men have been listing, and they can actually own it and take accountability for that, which is not something that we've seen overall. But my problem with that is that group is very small, very hard to find in many cases. They're called pick-me's. They're disrespected by other black women. You know what I mean? You don't believe me? Go listen to Shay Sade on her channel. And Shay Sade can break all of this down and has been doing so. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying those black women don't exist, but I will say they're few in number and they're hard to find. And as a consequence, there are many men that have either gone monk, which is a whole nother response people don't want to think about, or they've started to look elsewhere for intimate relationships. Politically, if they're still interested in uplifting the black community, they'll do so and they'll interact with black women on those terms, and that's about it. But for those who are not politically active, not politically interested in raising improving the quality of the black community, they're going to withdraw wholeheartedly. Oh, they may pay some, lip service to some things. They may participate in certain activities. For the most part, it's going to be, this is a huge shift that we're watching. It's in process. It's like a snowball going down a hill. It's growing, but it is a product and a response to how black men and boys have been treated in the last few decades. So anyway, hope you got something out of it. I look forward to hearing your responses. Let me know what your thoughts are. I wish y'all well. Enjoy the holiday. Peace.